All right, well, good morning once again. We're going to talk this morning about hope. So the last song was really appropriate to kind of end with that statement, Jesus, there's no one beside you forever, the hope in my heart, that Jesus is the hope that we have in our heart. Originally, with Riverside, one of the phrases, the slogans that we used early on in the church is real hope for real people in the real world. It's not one that we use all the time now, but it still fits really well. It's still exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring the real hope of Jesus Christ to real people like you and I in the real world, to take the real hope of Jesus and connect it to our everyday lives so that it's not just something that we come and think about and ponder on Sunday morning, but it's something that invades and takes over our life every single day of the week. And at the risk of sounding too ethereal, we're going to look at hope, but we're going to look at it in a really practical way, because as we've been going through the book of Ruth, and hopefully you've been here with us so far in the series, it's been a really encouraging and challenging series, but it's been kind of depressing, right? I mean, Ruth, the whole point of the first sermon was suffering is the breeding ground for real love, right? Nobody wants to hear that, right? We don't want to hear that suffering is where you really learn to love well. We don't want to learn that we need to love against our feelings, against our emotions, and love because it's the right thing to do. Love when it's hard, love when it's difficult, love when it costs us something, right? And so when you hear those things, the question that comes up is, well, why? Why should I do that, right? And hope answers the question of why. Hope answers the question, why should I persevere when things get tough, when there's an easier way, when there's a way that looks more simple, when there's a shortcut, when there's a different direction that I could take? Why do I stay on this path? Why do I stay on the path of God's love? And the answer to that question is hope. Without hope, we don't have a good, tangible answer to that question. And so as I'm thinking about hope today, there's a lot of different ways you could define it, but I'm thinking about it today as hope is like the fuel that goes in the tank of a life of a believer, of someone who's following God. The thing that fuels us every day is hope. When we get out of bed in the morning, the reason that we get up and we go about our day and we do things in a way that honors and pleases God is because we have hope. We've placed our hope in something greater than ourselves. And so let's take a look at where we're going to see this glimpse of hope appear in the story of Ruth and Naomi. And we're picking it up in chapter 2, Ruth chapter 2. We're going to begin in verse 1, and we're going to read down through 16. We're going to read the whole thing, and then we're going to go back and pull out some parts and take a look at it. And so follow along with me in your Bible. Ruth chapter 2, verse 1. It says this, "Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, 'Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favor.' And she said to her, 'Go, my daughter.' And so she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, 'The Lord be with you.' And they answered, 'The Lord bless you.' When Boaz said to this young man who was in charge of the reapers, 'Whose young woman is this?' And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, 'She is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab.' She said, 'Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers.' And so she came, and she's continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest." So let's just pause here for a minute and kind of help set the stage. Naomi and Ruth had just gotten into town. They had just come from Moab back into Israel. And we saw last week, Keith talked about that it was at the time of the barley harvest. This was the very beginning, the first glimpse of hope. If you remember, they left originally because there was a drought, there was famine, there was no food. And now we're told that they're returning at a time when the harvest is coming in. God has brought rain. There's an actual crop to harvest, and they're harvesting it. So it's an exciting time. It's a time of joy in the town. And so they get in, and Ruth doesn't wake up. She doesn't sleep in. She doesn't be like, "Oh, new city, I'm on vacation." Not like I did for the past 2 weeks of like, how long can I sleep in, right? She got up early. She said, "I'm hungry. We've got nothing. I'm going to go out to the field. I'm going to get to work. I'm going to go gather grain." And so as they were gathering the grain, she would go along behind them and try and just eke out a living. One commentator compared this to collecting aluminum cans right, to earn land. You see the people that go around and collect aluminum cans just so they can turn them in, just so they can get enough money just to get some food in their belly. And so Ruth got up early in the morning and went out and said, hey, I'm just going to go and see who will allow me to come into their field and do this. And so she does this, and then Boaz shows up and says, hey, who's this lady, right? Let's continue on in verse 8. And then Boaz said to Ruth, now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? But Boaz answered her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your mother and your father and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Then she said, I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants. And at mealtime Boaz said to her, come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine. So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed to her roasted grain. She ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. And when she rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. And also pull out some from the bundles for her, and leave it for her to glean, and do not rebuke her. So you can almost sense in the story here this turn from the bleak outlook, the challenge, the trials and the struggles that they're facing, and all of a sudden, things begin to change. There starts to be a glimmer of hope on the horizon. And so as we look at this today, there's three things that I want to look at related to hope. We're going to look at perceiving hope, we're going to look at preparing for hope, and we're going to look at participating in hope. Perceiving hope, seeing it, realizing it's there, realizing that it's a reality. Preparing for hope, putting ourselves in a position to receive hope, and then participating in hope, becoming a part of the story that God is working. So beginning, perceiving hope. And it begins with this reality, that hope is the deepest reality for those who trust in God. That no matter what goes on in our day, no matter what our day brings us, no matter what struggles or trials or difficulties or joys or accomplishments we face, at the end of the day, our greatest and deepest hope lies in Jesus Christ and what he has done. We know that whatever happens today, worst case scenario, I die and I get to go be with God forever because of what Jesus has done. And so underlying everything else, all the context that happens, is this deep-rooted truth that hope is at the heart of everything that we do. It's the undercurrent of our story and all that we do. We see that God is at work and he's in control. And we believe that he has a greater purpose in mind, that life's not just a random series of events and accidents, but that everything has purpose behind it and meaning. Many of you know the verse Jeremiah 29:11, right? It's a life verse for a lot of people. I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. It's really hopeful, right? It's really encouraging. The thing that a lot of times we don't think about and realize is that this is coming through the prophet Jeremiah at the beginning of the exile, right? That the nation of Israel has just been punished and sent out and exiled, and he said, hey, you're going to be there for a long time. That today's not the day that you come into your glory. Today's the day that you begin a long journey, but I want you to know that it's not in vain, that when things get tough, when things get difficult, I want you to know that I have a plan and a purpose to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a hope and a future. And as followers of Jesus, we believe that. That's where our joy comes from. So we may be sorrowful, we may be grieving, we may experience difficulty, but at a deep, deep level, we have this well of joy that comes from knowing what Jesus has done and what he's promising to us. It's kind of fascinating here in verse 3, you see this phrase. It says that she went out and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz. See, back then it wasn't as orderly and structured as we have it today with property rights like really marked out and roads and territories. They had these big fields, and there would be stones that would mark, okay, this is where this person's end and this person begins. And to the locals, they would kind of understand and know, but to a foreigner coming in, it would just look like a mishmash of stones and markers, and she wouldn't have understood where she was going. And so she went out and is kind of in the fields and just happens to end up in Boaz's field, right? Well, we know you guys watch movies, you read stories, you read books. When something like this happens, you're like, wait a minute, this isn't just random. This isn't just a chance. Something is happening. Something greater is at work here. In fact, it's emphasized in the original text. If you translate it directly, it's almost as saying, as luck would have it, she chanced upon the field. Kind of like wink, wink, like, hey, guess what just happened, right? Just so happened that she ended up in Boaz's field, right? Have you guys experienced this in your life? Have you had something happen where it was just like so outrageous that you're like, there's no way that this was just chance, that this is God orchestrating, working behind the scenes to make this happen? And sometimes it just happens really crystal clear. I experienced this in my own life. I was, before I came to work at the church, I was working for a company over in King of Prussia. We were importing goods from China and selling them online through this company. And one of the problems we were having is that we were getting a lot of damaged returns. So they were coming from China in a crate, and then we were shipping them via UPS into people's houses, and somewhere in that process, stuff was getting broken and busted up. And so I had to fly down to our warehouse in Kentucky to kind of figure out what was going on. And so I was kind of excited to go down there, not because of all the damages, because that was a mess, but because my good friend, Mark Kripsick, who had been on staff at Riverside, had recently just left to go to Southern Seminary. And so he was down there in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was really looking forward to hanging out with him and reconnecting and seeing how he was doing. And so I get there, and the night that we're supposed to go hang out, suddenly he calls and he says, hey, Ez, I'm so sorry. I know you're only in town for a short time, but our son, he just got hurt. We've got to take him to the ER. We're not going to be able to hang out tonight. And he ended up being totally fine, but that removed them from the story, okay? So here I am in Louisville, Kentucky. I don't really know anybody else. I've got nothing to do, and so I'm like, well, there's a seminary here. There's got to be a Christian coffee shop somewhere around here, right? So I get in Google, and I type in Louisville Christian coffee shop or Christian cafe or something, and the Google search, the first thing that pops up is Christian cafe, Christian singles dating website, right? And so at this point, I was not married to Trina, just so you know. And so I go on this, I'm like, well, I'm bored, I've got nothing to do. 10-day free trial. You don't have to pay anything, just sign up and then get on. So I'm like, hey, what do I have to lose, right? So I go on and I create this profile, and it starts matching me up with these people. And so I send out a couple emails to some different people. But there's this one girl who's just like jumps off the page. She's really beautiful and she looks cool. And so I send her a message, and I'm really hoping to hear back from her. And lo and behold, I end up hearing back from her. And so through the course of that couple days I'm in Louisville, I'm going back and forth. And then at the end of the time, I'm getting ready to leave to come back to Philly. And she says, hey, I'm only on here for the 10-day free trial. So I'm not going to keep going on this website. But if you want to keep talking, here's my MySpace information. That's when MySpace was really cool. So do you guys even remember that? So she sent me her MySpace info, and we started talking, and you guys may have guessed already that this is the story of how I met with my wife, Trina. Now, Trina was living up in New York. I was from Philly. I went to Louisville, Kentucky. I was looking for a Christian coffee shop. I signed up for a 10-day free trial at the same time that she just so happened to chance to sign up for a 10-day trial. And a year and a half later, we were married, and I can't imagine being married to anybody. I mean, she's the perfect wife for me, the perfect spouse for me. And so I look at that situation, and I say, wow, God, thank you that the Kripsick son had to go to the ER that night. I mean, how many different pieces moved so that could happen? And I know that you guys have experienced these same things in your life, right? You've had an experience where you say, man, God is at work. I have hope that God is working, even in difficult things, even in sending a child to the ER, right? Even in sending me on a flight to Louisville, Kentucky to deal with a bunch of damaged goods. God was working in the midst of that to do something powerful and incredible in my life. And the stories go on and on that. And so the pagan belief is, or the scientific or the humanistic belief is that life is a circle, right? You're born, you do some stuff, you accumulate some things, and then you die. You end up right back where you started. You just evaporate into the ether or into the universe, or if it's the Lion King, you turn into some sort of cloud lion up in the sky, right? But ultimately, it's just a circle. There's no real hope. There's no real excitement. It's just you just say Hakuna Matata, right? You celebrate it if you're going to sing the circle of life, and you say, hey, I was born, I'm going to do a bunch of stuff, and then I'm going to die, and that's it. But that's not what the Christian believe. That's not our hope. Our hope, Paul Miller talks about the J-shaped stroke of the Christian life, that the Christian life, the follower of God, believes in redemption, believes in resurrection, that we're going to be living a story, things are going to be good, then things are going to get bad. We're going to suffer. We're going to go through the desert. We're going to struggle. We're going to go through trial. But we always believe that God is going to redeem it. And it's kind of good, bad, better, best, right? And this happens on a macro scale in our life. We're born, we die, and then we go to be with Jesus forever. So that's the big story picture. But throughout our life, we have these little J curves that happen through our life, right? We get to a certain level, we plateau, we're not growing, we're comfortable. God sends us through a trial or a struggle or a difficulty. We go through it, and we come out on the other side redeemed, drawn closer to him. That's where our hope comes from. And so I hope wherever you're at today in your life that you perceive this hope. If you need to find it, look through the Bible. There's a million stories. It's every single story in the Bible, essentially. Abraham was a good man. He was a godly man, a righteous man, but he was too old to have kids. He had given up on the hope for that, and God comes along and says, you're going to have a son. You're going to have a great nation. And even after some additional struggles and trials, eventually God brings that to fruition. Joseph had a dream from God that he was going to lead, and then he was thrown into a pit by his brothers, and then he was sold into slavery, and then he lived righteously, but he was thrown into jail for something he didn't do, and he lingered in jail for a long, long, long time, but eventually he raised to the second highest position in Egypt and was able to save the nation of Israel. Moses, born in the palace, murdered somebody, saved God's people, right? David, anointed king, slayed Goliath. Saul hunted him and tried to kill him, became king, honored God. That over and over, the nation of Israel, Jonah, Elijah defeats the prophets of Baal, says, woe is me, under a bush, gets whisked off to heaven in a chariot. Just read the Bible over and over. Is this story of redemption, of resurrection, that is our hope as followers of Jesus, and that's the hope that we rely on. For Riverside Church, we saw it forever. We were meeting in a movie theater, and we wanted to meet in a building, and so we prayed, and we saw it, and we saved money, and we planned, and we tried at Pickertown Road, and we failed, and we tried at Titus Avenue, and we failed, and we tried in Chalfont, and we failed, and finally we said, God, we're happy being a movie theater church. And he taught us to value people more than property, and people more than programs, and people more than anything, that the church is the people, that discipleship and relationship is what matters. And once he had taught us that lesson, then he brought us into a facility where we could really multiply that and do that even more and more. And I believe that God has more of that he wants to do in our church. For me, I was working at this company. I was doing these things. I came on staff at Riverside. It was really exciting. Then all of a sudden, Aaron Harvey says, hey, I'm going to seminary. I'm taking a job with the seminary to work with church planners. And suddenly, I'm like, hey, well, where does that leave me? What's that mean for my future? What's going to happen? There was uncertainty. But God brought us through that period and brought me into a season of ministry in my life that was beyond what I ever could have expected or hoped for, to be fruitful and used by God in powerful ways that I never would have even dreamed of or desired. And I say that in all humility. It wasn't something that I planned or looked for, that I look around at the people that God has drawn to himself in this church, and I feel privileged to be a part of the story that he's writing here. And so Ruth and Naomi, when we meet them at this point of the story, are at the bottom of this J curve, right? They had things pretty good in Moab. They had married. They had family. Then suddenly all of it is stripped out from them, and they're down at the bottom. They're at the lowest point. And when you're at the lowest point, this is what Paul Miller says we should do. He says, we don't know when or how resurrection will come. We know it's coming, but we don't know when, and we don't know how. How many times do you think Joseph, when he was locked in that prison, waiting for somebody to come and remember him, he told the dreams of two guys that were in there, and he said, hey, when you get out, don't forget me. They got out. They forgot him. He lingered in jail a long time, and he had to get to a point where he said, God, is this a resurrection story, or am I just going to die in jail? What's going to happen here? We don't know when or how the resurrection is going to come. And when it does, we don't know what it will look like. We don't know what that story is. A lot of times it's a lot bigger and better than what we could have ever hoped for or expected, but almost all the time it doesn't look like what we were expecting. He says it's our job to embrace the death before us. If God has brought us to a low point, it's because he's killing off something in us that's taking his place in our heart. We've become dependent on our own strength. We've come to seek comfort rather than closeness to God. Whatever it is that God is trying to kill off in you, just let it die. Take this moment and say, God, you've brought me to this moment for a reason. I'm going to accept it. I'm at a low point. I'm just going to learn to just trust in you and you alone in this time. And fourth, he says that if we endure, resurrection will always come. Resurrection will always come. You might not see it in this life, but resurrection will always come. And so that's perceiving the hope. We see that hope is out there. We see it biblically. We see it in our lives, in our stories, in our experiences. We know that there is good, founded, solid basis to hope that God is working in our situation to do something far better than we could hope or imagine. It's our job to patiently endure and wait to see it, to look for it. The second thing, preparing for hope, or being positioned for hope, or putting yourself in a place of hope. There's a lot of P words that we can connect here, right? That put us in this, this is a pastor's dream, right? All these P's. It's putting us in a place to be prepared, to be positioned for hope. This is not God helps those who help themselves, okay? I don't want you guys to get that idea that somehow that I'm saying like, hey, pull yourself by your bootstraps if you want God to come alongside you. But rather it's God helps those who pursue him, who desire him, who have learned to seek him no matter what is going on in their life. And God loves to reach out and to encourage and to strengthen those. It's much like the story of the prodigal son. When Ruth and Naomi were in Moab, it was like when the prodigal son was in the pigsty, right? They went to a place they shouldn't have been. They stayed there far longer than they should have been. And they finally came to a place where they said, hey, there's food back in my father's house. What am I doing here? And so I want to ask you, are you positioned to experience hope? If you're in a relationship with somebody that you just should not be in a relationship with, are you going to remain there? Are you going to linger there? Or are you going to put yourself in a position of hope? If you're messing around with sin, if you're messing around with things in your life that just shouldn't be there, how long are you going to stay there? Or are you going to purge it out? Are you going to clean it out so that God can begin to work, so that hope can begin to rise and emerge? So many times we're waiting for a miracle rather than putting ourselves in a position to receive one. We don't want to take the thing of like, man, I'm just going to dig a deeper ditch because that way when God saves me out of it, it'll be that much more glorious, right? That's not wise. That's not how you want to live. You want to say, hey, I can see the ledge. It's way up there, and I can't get there without God. It's impossible. There's nothing I can do, but I can climb a little bit closer. How high can I get? I'll get there. And I'll put myself in a position that when the rescue comes along, that they can see me, right? Are you in a position to experience hope? Or is there something in your life that's put you in a position where you can't see the hope? Or you won't be ready to receive it when it comes along? Second thing in preparing for hope, focus on what you have, not on what you lack. Ruth focuses on what is available to her, not what she doesn't have. She doesn't wake up in the morning and say, my husband's dead, I don't have a family, I committed myself to this grouchy old lady. She's lamenting, not even acknowledging that I'm here helping her. She didn't do any of that. She woke up and she said, hey, we're hungry, and there's an opportunity to get food. Because she had returned to the nation of Israel, and God had systematically provided for the poor in that community. God had created a way through his divine knowledge and wisdom and love in the law. He had created these laws about gleaning, and it's in Leviticus chapter 19, and it's actually in the section that talks about loving your neighbor as yourself. And so he says, hey, love your neighbor as yourself, and as a clear example of that, this is what he says. He says in Leviticus 19, verse 9, when you reap the harvest of your land, you should not reap your field right up to its edge, and neither shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. And you shall not strip your vineyard bare, neither shall you gather the fallen grapes from your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. And so God had created a system in which the poor could be provided for, but they had to go out and do something. It wasn't, hey, gather a bunch of your stuff and then take it to the home of the poor and drop it off for them. He said, hey, when you harvest your field, don't go all the way up to the edge. Leave some around the edges. And if you drop some sheaves, don't go back and pick every last one up. Leave it so that the poor may come out to the fields, may roll up their sleeves, and they may have a way to provide for themselves. God had provided provision. And Ruth said, hey, I would love to have a man who's out there working for me, right? I'd love to be here at home raising the kids, but that's not where God's got me right now. God's got me in a place where I can go out to the field and I can grab food and I can provide so that we can eat for today. Focus on what you have, not on what you don't have. Man, this is a huge one, right? How many times in your life do you focus on all the things that you don't have? And as Americans, it can get really embarrassing really quick. Oh, yeah, we've got 2 cars in the driveway, but one of them's got like 60,000 miles on it. I mean, like, how much longer could that last, right? I lost my iPad, so now I'm going to have to open up my laptop and go online. You know what I mean? Like, it can be ridiculous when we start to focus on what we don't have. And when you really look at it and say, man, so much of our life is focused on the next thing, and that's our consumer-driven society, right? Our consumer-driven society always has us looking ahead. What's the next thing? What don't I have? What do I need? What's the thing that's missing in my life that's going to bring me fulfillment? But the key to being prepared for hope is to focus not on what you don't have, but focus on what you have. That's what Ruth said. She said, I have a relationship with Naomi, who I love, and I have an opportunity to go and feed us, and that's what I'm going to do. The third thing in preparing for hope is to pursue a godly character regardless of your situation. Whether you're in riches or poor, whether you're sick or you're well, pursue godly character. If you read through this passage, look at all these good things that Ruth does. Ruth is active. She's not passive. She takes action. She seeks God's favor. She works hard. She's humble. She's unassuming. She receives well. When Boaz wants to give her stuff, she doesn't say, oh, no, I don't need that. No, I'm good. I'll just go glean some more, right? She receives a good gift well. She's grateful. She's thankful. In Psalm 37, there's a bunch of verses that relate to this. The whole psalm is really excellent. I don't have time to read it all right now, but listen to some of the phrases that come out of Psalm 37. It says, better is the little that the righteous has than the abundance of many wicked. For the arms of the wicked shall be broken, but the Lord upholds the righteous. Down in verse 23, the steps of a man are established by the Lord when he delights in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be cast headlong, for the Lord upholds his hand. I have been young, and now I am old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken for his children, or his children begging for bread. He is ever lending generously, and his children become a blessing. God is saying over and over in Scripture, pursue righteousness. God loves to bless the righteous. This is not work salvation, and we shrink back from this sometimes because we're like, man, we don't want to preach salvation by works. It's by grace alone. I'm a wretch. It's only, and that's absolutely true for salvation. That salvation comes by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. But it doesn't mean that we don't work hard to pursue righteousness. Pursue God. Go hard after Him. Put yourself in a position to receive hope, to receive blessing. Jesus says, seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all of these things will be added to you. And I'll share briefly just another part of that story that I shared about meeting Trina. See, around that same time, Mark had left to go to seminary, and so I had taken over leading worship, still as a volunteer at the church. But at the same time, a church in Westchester called and said, hey, we want to give you a building. And so we sent our other associate pastor, David Pearson, out to Westchester. And so suddenly we went from a staff of 3 down to a staff of 1 at Riverside. And I had been talking with the pastor, Aaron Harvey, and he said, hey, when you get back from Louisville, let's sit down. I want to talk to you. And I knew what that meant. I knew that he was going to invite me to come on staff at the church. And so while I was in Louisville, I was thinking about this. I was praying about this. There was a really great book that I was reading about the 24/7 prayer revolution that happened in Europe at the time. And I remember distinctly flying home from Louisville on the plane. It was a really early flight in the morning. The sun was rising through the clouds. I was praying, and I just remember having this peace of God on me and just saying, man, I'm going to do it. I'm going to leave my job. I'm going to go. When Aaron asked me, I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to go on staff, and I'm going to follow his leading. And I just don't believe that it was by accident that same week that I made that choice in my life was the same week that God introduced me to the wife that He was going to give me. And hear me clearly, it wasn't, God, I'm gonna do this, but you better get me on the back end, right? It wasn't like, God, I'm gonna be obedient to you, but you better hook me up, right? At this point, she was just a girl I had sent a couple emails to. There was no real expectation or hope. But I see that as I pursued righteousness, as I sought first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, that He came along and He added to me the blessing of a good wife. Am I saying to you that you should quit your job and come work at the church if you're single so that you can get a spouse? No, I'm not saying that. I don't know that that's your story. That was my story. That's what God did in my life. But I am encouraging you this. Pursue Him. Seek Him first. Seek His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. He will give you everything that you need. I encourage you. I promise you that this is true. And so I ask you, are you pursuing righteousness? Or is your greatest pursuit comfort, love, entertainment? It's pretty easy to see this. Take a look at your weekly schedule. Take a look at your day planner. Take a look at your account in your bank, right? Where are you spending your time and your talents and your treasure? Are you out at the bar or are you at small group, right? On Sunday morning, are you sleeping in? Are you coming to church? Are you putting yourself positionally in a place to experience hope? God is at work in his church, and when you come to church faithfully week after week, you're putting yourself in a position to encounter and experience him and experience hope. Third thing is participating in hope. And I wish I had a lot more time to dig into this, but I'll just say this. Take a look at Boaz and look at how amazing his part of the story is, right? Here's another person who was pursuing righteousness. He was pursuing a godly character. He was doing the right things for the Lord. And he sees this woman, Ruth, and he's just amazed by her. He's in awe of the hesed love that she is showing to Naomi. And he's like, I want to be a part of your story. I want to be involved with what you're doing. God's doing something amazing here. And so he says over here, hey, may the Lord bless you for what you're doing. May God pour out his riches. May he bring you under his wing. And what Boaz didn't realize is that God said, yeah, I am going to do that, and I'm going to use you to do it. See, there's a greater hope even than the hope for our own life. It's the hope for the lives of those around us. That we get really excited when we get to participate and be a part of bringing hope to someone else. Now, in our church, we took a trip to Brazil a while back, the very first trip that we went on. There was a guy named Steve Ristosi who was going on the trip. He had been faithful to God in hosting a small group in his home, and one of the guys who started coming to that small group was a guy named Rob, who's here this morning. And Rob, first time I met with him, said, hey, I'm giving my life to Jesus, but I'm not going to do groups, and I'm not going to meet up with other people, and I'm not going to do any of those things. But little by little, God worked on his heart, and so he started going to this group and developed a relationship with Steve. And he felt compelled by God that as Steve was going to this, he said, hey, do you have a pocket knife? And Steve's like, nah, Steve, if you guys know Steve Ristosi, he's not a MacGyver. I mean, he's kind of like a MacGyver, but he's not a Crocodile Dundee kind of guy, right? He's not packing the mega blade. And so Rob really felt compelled that Steve needed to take this knife with him. And so he took the knife with him on the trip. They get there, they do ministry, they meet this guy, Pastor Humberto, who's doing amazing ministry there in Brazil. And at the end of the week, Steve feels compelled. He's like, I don't know why, but I feel compelled to give him this knife. I know Rob gave it to me to keep for mine, but I want to give it to Humberto. And so he gave it. He just felt compelled, and he did it in obedience. Left a note, hey, here's a knife for you. Thanks for everything you do. When we got back, Scott Jackson, who was leading the trip, got this emotional, tearful letter from Humberto who said, hey, when I was a child, the thing that I really wanted was a pocket knife. But our family was too poor to afford one. And as I've gotten older and I've gone into ministry, resources are always tight. It just feels frivolous to buy a knife when there's so many other needs. And I've been praying lately because I feel like God has called me to ministry, but I just don't know how I'm going to provide for my family. And when Steve gave him that knife, it was like God saying to Humberto, I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to give you not only what you need, but what you want. I'm going to give you the desires of your heart. Just, I've got you. I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to take care of you. And as he shared that story with Scott, Scott shared that story with Steve. Steve shared that story with Rob. Rob shared that story with the people in the group. They shared the story with the church. We all joined in with that story of hope. And it was incredible to participate in the story of hope. And as we'll see as we continue, that Boaz is going to participate in a great way in this story of hope. Let me ask you, are you positioned to participate in the story of hope, in your own hope, in the hope of others? Because there was one great example. Jesus Christ came. He's our greatest hope. He's the greatest example of all of these things. He always perceived the hope. No matter how dark the situation got, he always knew that God was at work. When there was a storm on the boat, he knew that God was going to bring them through safely. When there was no food to eat, he knew that God would provide. He always perceived the hope. He was always positioned for the hope. He lived a life of righteousness and expectation. And he participated in hope in the greatest way possible by giving his life so that we could all receive hope. That's the story of the gospel. That's what we catch a glimpse of in the story of Ruth, and that's what I hope that you're catching a glimpse of in your life. Would you join me in prayer? Father, what a privilege, what an exciting thing to see the gospel. The gospel gets us excited because when we see the gospel, we see you at work. We see what you've done, what you're doing, what you're going to do, and a tiny glimpse of what you're doing in our lives. God, help us to take out all the clutter, all the distractions, everything that would keep us from running hard after you so that there's nothing in between us and the hope that you're working out. God, if we're in a desert season, Help us to endure with patience and expectation and hope, and to pursue holiness and righteousness until the time when you see fit in your right and perfect timing to deliver us and bring the redemption story together. And Father, if there are any here who don't know you today, I pray that they would seek hard after you, that you would stir in their heart a desire to know the living God who brings hope to every single situation. And I pray this in the precious name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. Well, as we respond, we're going to sing this song, Not for a Moment. Not for a moment will you forsake me. I want to invite you to stand with us, pray, sing praise to God. Keith will be up here. If you'd like to come and pray, he would love to pray with you and to pray some words of hope into your heart as we close out the service today.